All right, guys, we are back for another episode of Bus Stop Blogs, where each week I give you a recap of what we've been up to at the Iron Yard. We are wrapping up week number 8, and with that is the conclusion of our back-end fundamentals. And then on Monday, we start our specialized area that we're going into. So it's been a really, really great week. I like back-end more than I thought I would. It's still not my preference, but I really enjoy it and really enjoy some of the things that you can do with it. You just have a lot of ability to make dynamic websites, so it's very, very cool, and I've really, really enjoyed it. So anyway, it's been a busy week. Our weekly project this week was to build a code snippet organizer. So kind of like GitHub, but certainly not as robust or powerful. But basically, it's just what it sounds like. So essentially, we had to have a way to create a username and password, log in, create some snippets of code that have some tags. You've got to be able to like search by those tags, or search by the title, or search by the language. So it was pretty cool. I was able to get the bulk of that project done in about 6 or 7 hours, and then kind of just spent the rest of the time this week just kind of tweaking it here and there, and I'm pretty proud of it. It's using Mongo, Express, and Node, of course. So yeah, I'm liking it. I think I'll probably deploy that onto Heroku at some point this weekend, and when I do that, I'll be sure to put a link to it in the comments or the notes of this video, so that you can check that out if you want to. So what is cool about this project is I decided to do the templating with EJS. I think I've probably mentioned the difference between EJS and Mustache Express in one of these videos before, but we've been doing most of our assignments using Node at the Iron Yard with Mustache, and that's great. I like it. I like how clean it is. Basically, it removes JavaScript from your template, and you're only passing in data. So it definitely separates your code and makes it much cleaner, much more readable. So there's that benefit. That said, there are some limitations when using Mustache as opposed to something like EJS. So I had the option to pick either EJS or Mustache for this project, and EJS is not something that we've learned at the Iron Yard. It's something that I learned on my own, and so I decided to go for it and use it, and it worked out really well. So I'm liking it a lot for sure. So if you get a chance and think about it, go back and check out that Heroku page when I deploy it, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm a fan. So we've also been learning this week about Postgres. So Postgres is a relational database. The two, basically, if you could categorize databases as two different types, you've got relational and non-relational. So Postgres is the relational database that we've been using. Mongo is the non-relational database that we've been using. So to kind of talk about what the differences between those two are, Mongo it's called non-relational because each piece of data can change its properties without regard to other objects in the data. So, for example, if you had a data set of people in Mongo, and every time you created the person, they had the properties of just basic properties of like name, age, email, gender, like just normal contact info stuff. And then let's say that you wanted to add to just one or two of them, for whatever reason, you wanted to add hair color, but only to those one or two, not the others. You can do that in Mongo, which obviously has its benefits. You know, you can do things like pass in an array of data to a property in Mongo. That's really easy to do. So manipulating the data that way is definitely a huge benefit to using something like Mongo over Postgres. Postgres, I'll do my best to explain this without visual aid. Basically, imagine you had like a spreadsheet. Think in tables for Postgres, and so for that same example of people, if I wanted to add the hair color property to one of the people, that hair color attribute has to be assigned to every single person in the database. It doesn't necessarily have to be filled in. It could have a value of null, but it does have to exist on each person in the database. So that has its pros and cons. I didn't think I would like Postgres as much as I ended up liking it. So I've gotten to spend a little bit more time on it this week. One thing that's unique about Postgres and is really powerful about Postgres is, say, for example, you are building a blog site, okay? A user goes in, writes an article. That article would not be attached to that user. That article or that blog post that they wrote would be in its own separate table or spreadsheet, if you want to think of it that way. And then they are linked up with an ID. So let's say that user with the ID of 23 writes a blog post about puppies. And then that blog post gets stored in the table that's designated just for blog posts. Well, each blog post would have assigned to it a user ID that would match up with the person who wrote it. So this blog post about puppies would have a user ID of 23, and then you would use that to sync up the data, thus rendering it to the page correctly with the author's name and the blog post. On the surface, that seems like a very roundabout way to do it, and you would think, why not just do it the Mongo way and attach the article or the blog post to the author in an array of different articles. Initially, you might think that that's the better way to go, but I really think that Postgres is pretty powerful in this way, especially in the case where this wouldn't be true for a blog post, but say if for some reason that blog post had to be associated with many users, you wouldn't want that blog post to be replicated on each user, because then that becomes a lot of data. It would be much easier to just assign it to different users via that table. So anyway, it's pretty powerful stuff, and I think I'm going to start using that a little bit more than Mongo, possibly, depending on the project, you know. So speaking of, there is a project I've been doing and kind of refactoring over the past couple of weeks, just making it just a more robust, real life type of project. Essentially, I'm making a LinkedIn clone, and I almost had it finished using Mongo, and then learned about Postgres and how powerful it was, and learned how to use it, and learned how like I've got it set up where different users can message each other, so it's basically like email, but something like that setup is a lot more efficient in a relational database. So I'm now in the process of refactoring this LinkedIn clone so that it'll be done with Postgres. So once that gets done, I'll also deploy that to Heroku. I think I'll be able to get that done this weekend, but we'll see. I just started it last night, the refactor, and you know, it's a bit more involved than just, you know, switching over the database, because a lot of your code has to change as a result. Even things like the way user authentication works is a little bit different with Postgres than it is with Mongo. So because you're not dealing with a schema like you are with Mongo. So it's definitely interesting. Today and the latter half of yesterday has been time for us to catch up on our projects, anything that's not turned in. And I'm the only student in the class who has everything turned in. And so I got to spend the entire afternoon yesterday basically just having a one-on-one lesson with our instructor, Eric. And that was awesome. It was really, really cool. We dove into Postgres quite a bit and did some neat things with it. So anyway, Monday I start React, and I am crazy excited about it. We're about to be building some really, really powerful stuff. I can't wait to tell you about my final project. I haven't started on it just yet, and you won't hear about it till it's closer to being done, but it's going to be really, really cool. All right, well, I'm here at the Iron Yard. Thanks for watching. See you next week.